Welcome to Tough Conversations with David Wood, where play meets depth. We help teams and high-performing leaders like you to master your tough conversations so you succeed in your career and in your life. When we avoid tough conversations, we stay small. Teams stay disengaged, conflicted, and ultimately end up quitting. When we lean in and master our tough conversations, they become the defining moments that literally shape our careers, our relationships, and our lives. So let's dive in and master your next tough conversation so you can be the leader that you would follow. Let's play. Welcome everybody to another episode of Tough Conversations with David Wood, and I'm excited by my guest. I'll introduce her soon, but first let's get her out here and just say hello, Susan Campbell. Thanks for being on the show.
Hello, David Wood. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. We're going to talk about your book, From Triggered to Tranquil, and I want to tell people first why they might want to listen to you. Psychologist Susan Campbell has worked as a corporate trainer and relationship coach for 55 years. How's that for street cred? That's 2 years longer than I've been alive. So I don't think I'm going to try and compete with you because you got started before I was born. A former professor at the University of Massachusetts and frequent guest lecturer at Harvard, Stanford, and UCLA. She's the author of 12 books on the topic of relationships and human communication. 12 books! I've done one. Her work has been featured in many popular magazines, including New Woman, Psychology Today, Self, Harvard Business Review, Fast Company. You get the idea. She's been featured on such national TV shows as CNN's Newsnight, Good Morning America, and the Dr. Dean Edel Show. Susan trains coaches and therapists throughout the United States and Europe. So, Susan, I want to tell about what impresses me about you, but is there anything you want to add to this that people should know about you before we hear about From Triggered to Tranquil?
No, I like that 55 years comment, though, that it was 2 years before you were born.
Right, and I've been at it for a long time. Like, I've been at it for 20-something years, but you started before I came out of the womb.
Oh, I can hardly believe it myself, but it really gives you perspective. When you're in the same field, watching human behavior and watching the culture change for that long. It's just such a gift to be alive and kicking at the age that I am, which is 80.
80. Wow. Okay. So how you and I met, I started writing an app, and we were calling it Go Deeper. And then I wanted it to be more corporately accessible. So I did a lot of research. I searched for trademarks, all sorts of stuff. And I came up with the wonderful name of Get Real. And then later on, I discovered there's some woman over in the US who's using the name Getting Real. And I started feeling territorial. I'm like, hang on a cut and pick a minute. I thought I'd done all the research and whatever, and that you'd come along and just decided to use this thing. And so I reached out to you 6 years ago and said, hey, should we talk about this and maybe work out how we can divide up the world? And I don't know if I got a response back then, but I did get a response a few months ago from you saying, hey, I just found this message in my inbox and I'd be happy to chat. Fortunately, I had discovered since then that you have been around since Moses. I hope you don't mind me saying that, but from my perspective, you've been around, and I was the Johnny-come-lately to it. And I had picked something that infringed upon what you were doing. And then we got on a call, and you were so warm and generous and fun. And I found out you actually had Warner Earhart, who created a little company called S that then became the Landmark Forum, Landmark Education, and you actually had Warner in your class at Esalen when you were teaching. Is that right?
No, we were in groups together.
Oh, groups together.
I was not teaching him.
Oh, okay.
That was a misunderstanding.
All right. So you're training
I was
with
in a lot of the same groups that he was in, and we were friends and colleagues at that time.
All right, cool. Well, it still gives you street cred with me because I came too late, I think, to even meet the guy. So yeah, so now we know each other, and you were very friendly and said, "Look, send me some of your videos of what you're up to." And I was like, "Why?
Hmm.
Like why?" And you said you seem like a hip, happening, fun guy, and I want to see what you're doing. And then when I wanted someone to write the foreword to The Mouse in the Room, which is a new title of my book, I was asking for names, and you gave me names, and other people gave me names, and some people said Susan Campbell would be a great name. So I reached back out to you and said, what about this Susan Campbell woman? You think she'd be good to write the foreword?" And you said, "I'm happy to." So when you said you've got your book that you wanted to promote, I was thrilled to be able to say, of course, no brainer to have you on the show. So triggered to Tranquil. Again, before we get into this, in service of getting real and being authentic and being vulnerable, you shared an embarrassing story recently on Facebook, and I was mortified reading the story. And I wonder if you'd be willing to tell that embarrassing story, because I think it so models transparency and ownership and self-love.
Well, I want to put it in the context of I was responding to your share of your embarrassing moment,
Right.
a very current one. Mine was many, many years ago, and I'll tell you how old I was at the end of the story. But no, I better tell you right now. Look, I was only 10 years old when this happened. All right.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to give the punchline to people. I wet my pants on stage when I was giving a speech that was part of a storytelling competition at the Girl Scout camp. The last night of camp, all the parents were invited to come and stay at the camp. And the thing that was really mortifying for me were my girlfriends, my 10-year-old girlfriends, some of their cute older brothers were in the audience. Okay. So I'm about to go on stage, and I realized that I had to go to the bathroom. I had to pee. But being that age, I didn't know what options I had. And I think this could have happened to me at any age, actually. The show must go on, that pressure. So I figured, oh, I can handle this. I can put that aside. This is one of the things we learn not to do in the getting real work is don't try to push something out of your foreground. If something's in the foreground of your attention, you're not going to be able to be present.
Right.
So I did my best, tried to deny that I had to pee. And so I started telling my story, and I got quite a bit into it. And then I just couldn't hold my water any longer. And it just came out. And I'm standing there on the stage by myself, all these people, and there's no way to hide this. And so I just look down and I go, oh, I'm wetting my pants. And everybody laughed. And I just kind of stood there flat-footed. And people laughed. And so I laughed, and I probably just said something that got me off the stage. Like, I think that's about all the story I can give you right now. And I
Wow.
I walked off the stage. But the funny thing was, David, there was something about my image, or I don't know what it was. People said, "That was so clever, Susan. That tied right into your story." It's like I was embarrassed. But yet later, of course, people are trying to be nice, don't make the little 10-year-old feel bad. But I honestly believe that many people just projected onto me something of like confidence, or she doesn't screw up, or something like that. And it was very strange to me, because they said that was part of your story that fit so well into the story I was telling. And it did, if you stretch the imagination a little.
Right.
And so in a way, it was an embarrassing moment, but it also temporarily strengthened my self-image as somebody who can get away with shit.
Oh, right. I mean, if you can get away with that.
And it kind of, maybe it was a little overblown in terms of the self-confidence factor, but I wrote on that for a while.
Wow. Well, I want to double click on something there. It seems so powerful to me, this story. What you did As you know, I'm writing a book called Name That Mouse, or The Mouse in the Room. That for you must have been a pretty big mouse. I'm wetting my pants right now. Maybe they didn't know about it yet, so it's not an elephant, but it's
Yeah.
a rodent of unusual size. If for our Princess Bride fans, and what you did is you named it at the age of 10, standing on stage. You said those words that, as they say, will set you free. The truth. Oh, I seem to be wetting my pants. You named it, not just letting it happen and trying to pretend it didn't happen or whatever. I'm wetting my pants. And it seems like that was all there was to say. And then you got yourself off stage. You wouldn't know this about me, but I went on national television to play guitar and sing in a kilt when I was 20 something and trying to promote my entertainment business. And in the green room, I got so scared because I don't have a strong singing voice and I'd never performed on national television. I'd never been on national television. I was so scared. I lost 3 drops of urine, came out, and I'm wearing a kilt and underpants. And so now I'm terrified of peeing my pants on national TV. And I went and got a couple of extra pairs of underpants from my overnight bag just in case, and did a lot of breathing. I mean, nowadays I'd probably take a Valium before I did it. But I really, I think my story's a good one. Your story, I just have such respect, and I bow down that you peed your pants on stage, you named it. And I imagine after that, everything's kind of downhill from, everything's easy street after that. It's like,
Survived.
you can survive that. You can survive a lot of embarrassing things. So thank you for sharing that. Now, triggered to Tranquil, what are some situations where we would classically get triggered and it doesn't end well for us? Like, why do we care about this topic?
Yeah. Well, take a meeting. You might be in a business meeting or some kind of a group meeting, and someone interrupts you. You get your, oh, I'm not important, I'm invisible, fear trigger pushed, or get your button pushed. You don't let anybody know, but what that causes you to do is stay silent for the rest of the meeting and not make your contributions. And that happens so often. People get triggered, or we even get triggered and we don't really know we're triggered, but it conditions our behavior and makes us very narrow in our focus. You know, all I'm here in this meeting to do is protect myself, because that's what happens when you're triggered. You're going into a self-protection place in your brain rather than open and communicative place.
So I love this because the point that's coming out to me is our triggers, and I would call these mice, are not generally obvious. They're not always obvious. Sometimes it might be clear, oh, I'm furious right now. But other times I'm just shutting down because of something that was said, and I may not even be aware of it and until later. And then I imagine too, whoever said it, I'm probably going to hold something against that person. So now it's going to impact our relationship, and it might impact how I show up in meetings. You know, I was playing poker a couple of nights ago, and a guy won this big hand against me. And then he showed his cards and showed how he had nothing. He had the worst hand possible. And everyone was laughing, and he was laughing. And he said, "What were you doing? That was a silly bet. Why'd you bet like that?" I didn't like it. I already felt bad that I'd lost the hand to a total bluff. I also was bluffing, but I had a better bluff than he did. And I felt like he was rubbing my nose in it. And so I shut down. I went quiet, and I wasn't making eye contact with him. And he was trying to check if I was okay, but I didn't even look at him. I didn't have the resources. And fortunately, he had the wherewithal to check in and say, "Hey, was that rude?
Wow.
What I just did?"
Great. There's a lot of lessons in that story right there.
Oh, right. And I was, I felt safe enough with him to say, "Yes, I think it was." And I told him why. And he completely apologized. He said, "I felt like I crossed the line." But what you're bringing up is this concept of even micro triggers. They're fuzzy. We're not totally aware of them. All right. So now that brings up a new question of how we get clear. But what are some other examples? We got a meeting at work, some other areas where we might be triggered and need your tools.
Let's say you're living with somebody, whether it's your life partner or a housemate, and you're in your office and you hear them come home from work and the door slams, and you make that mean something, possibly because of some unrepaired triggers. You alluded to that a minute ago. You might be carrying stuff about this guy in the meeting who interrupted you. That's called an unrepaired rupture. So possibly if you've been living with somebody, you do have some of these unrepaired ruptures, and you've got a story that they're activated, they're angry. You heard that door slam, and we make up interpretations to any kind of situation that we tend to be sensitive to. So let's say I grew up in a household where there was a lot of yelling or fighting or door slamming. I could be extremely sensitive to the door slam. So my partner, housemates, I hear them slam the door and I make up a story, better avoid them for the rest of the evening. Or I'll be vigilant and be really conciliatory for the rest of the evening. But either way, you're coming from this self-protective place again. You're not dealing with reality. You're dealing with your story about reality, right?
Susan, I got to jump in here. It seems like you're describing my life here. This has been my Achilles heel for the last 40 days. And so I was going to use this as an example on the call, but I think what I'm getting from your story is that I have this story that I'm the only one that has that, and that I'm weird and wrong, and I wish my system wasn't so sensitive. And now you just told almost the exact story. So I had a tenant downstairs, and one day I got a string of angry messages. So now I'm like on alert, and I tried to resolve it, and it did not go well at all. We finally had a house meeting and just agreed to disagree, and that he would move out in 30 days. But now I got to live with someone for 30 days, and I'm carrying some unrepaired ruptures or triggers from that scenario, because when I tried to repair them, it didn't seem to go well. And I thought, let's just back off from this one and we'll just have him move out. Then a few days later, there was a fight at 1 o'clock in the morning. He was yelling at someone, screaming, angry voices, and quite vicious, the things I was hearing. And I was so triggered from that. And then after that, I was on eggshells. And I was so scared. And I know they call it now fawning behavior. I don't want to make him upset. And I'd hear a bang, or I'd hear a voice, and I'd go on alert. And it's happening now even with my new tenant, who was lovely. But my system's going on alert. So I just got to say, this interview is very personal for me, because I want to learn how to soothe, how to get to Tranquil for myself. So these are really two good examples. We got, you're in a meeting, something happens, maybe you feel shut down. You're at home, there could be a door bang, you're triggered. Your partner might say something. Maybe you're telling a story and they go off and start doing something else and whatever, and you're feeling like really like not worth anything, not worth very much. I want to dig a little bit deeper into how this gets us in trouble if we don't get aware of it. So let's say for me, if I'm not getting to Tranquil, how can I get in trouble in the home situation?
Well, first I want to just comment on, you became aware that you were kind of fawning or conciliatory. So I want to underscore that this whole book, From Triggered to Tranquil, is about noticing, learning to notice, these are the signs that I'm triggered, so that we don't get into the trouble that you're asking me about. So I just wanted to underscore that, because you gave us such a good example of that, of witnessing yourself. And so a lot of the exercises in this book help you learn to look at an old event, look at the elements of the old event. Every time I'm triggered, three of these four elements are present,
Right.
like conciliatory behavior, frozen nervous system, those kind of things.
Yeah. So the timing on this is amazing because I think it was 3 days ago, days ago, I sat down and finally read what my therapist had sent me
Mhm.
after our last session because I went and said, "Help, I'm triggered." And he sent me some stuff. I finally read it.
Mhm.
It was like the holy grail. So I knew about fight or flight, right? Everyone knows about that.
Yeah.
Then there's freeze,
Mhm.
and I knew about fawning behavior or conciliatory behavior. I didn't know that I did it. I
Yeah.
figured I'd be the one person in the world who never does that. And yet, a few days ago, when I heard a bang before I was due to get out of bed, I tried to go back to sleep, and then I heard another one, and then I heard another one. Not like, just people shutting doors.
Mhm.
And we'd talked about this, and I just couldn't get back to sleep. And now I'm feeling triggered. I'm feeling really anxious. And here's another sign I just discovered: looping in the brain. My brain was going over and over trying to fix this. So I didn't know that was one of the F's as well. I'm trying to fix this. And I
Yeah.
spent an hour agonizing about what message to send. And that's when I discovered that I was fawning. I
Ah.
was trying not to trigger because my last tenant got angry about something. Maybe this one, she's going to be like, "Oh, this guy's too much.
Well,
He's
let's
too
come back
much."
to, this is, you've given us some good material here to know what to do to soothe and calm your nervous system. But I liked your other question too. So I've got two that I'm wanting to answer. Your other one was like, what damage can be done
Right.
from some of these kinds of things?
Yeah, let's get to the damage before we solve it.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that creates a trigger situation is asking for what you want. People have a lot of charge around asking for what they want and having the answer be no or not now, or just having the answer be ignored. So asking for affection from your intimate partner. Let's say you ask. I've actually counseled people where the person will say, I initiated sex once with you back in 1989 and you said no, and so I decided I'm never going to initiate it again. That's why we're not having sex for 40
Wow.
years. Seriously, things like that. I mean, that's
Wow.
very tender. I mean, I'm saying it almost like a cartoon, but that's a very tender thing. But honestly, people do that a lot. Maybe
Right.
that's an
Right.
exaggerated example, but I asked for what I want and didn't get it, or I tried to bring up this subject and it didn't go well. I don't bring it up again. And these are there's a lot of very important conversations that people need to be having.
Right. Yeah. I
Backing off. They're backing off because the answer was unpleasant once or twice or numerous times, but still they get triggered and they make up a rule for themselves that it's not safe
yep.
to ask.
I like that term backing off. I see that image. That's what's happening energetically. I've got a friend, I just realized 3 years ago, I reached out and wanted to get on a phone call. I wanted some support with something, and he didn't seem to want to get on a call. So I stopped trying. All right. I made a story now. That didn't feel good to me. I'm like, oh, he's really not that interested in connecting. What do I know? If I want to connect over something else or it's a different time,
Mhm.
okay, so it can get us in trouble because we create distance with people. And then that's going to lead to some things in time and space, like maybe my job's harder now because I got an unrepaired rupture with this coworker or my boss. Or, oh, when I was 5 years old, I did a play
Mhm.
and I had to say, ooh, a trapdoor. And I was coached to do it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And finally, when we did it in front of the school, and I'm, one of the youngest kids in the whole school, um, following that every day of my life, some kid I'd never even met would stop me in the playground and go, "Ooh, a trapdoor!" And I shut down. I made it mean that they were making fun of me, and I asked to change schools so I could get away from that.
Wow.
Yeah, here I am now at 53 and I'm doing my next play right now. I'm coming back to it, but it took 48 years to it. So yeah, I can see how this really gets us into trouble at work or at home if we are either macro triggered or
Mhm.
micro triggered and don't have aren't able to deal with it. How do we I have there were two questions you wanted to answer. I wanted to check that you'd answered both of those before I ask you more.
The one about how to soothe yourself when you're looping around and, waking up in the middle of the night or early in the morning, that one.
Great. Yeah.
We put that for any time, but
Well,
that's
no, that's my next
one where
question is how do we handle these things? And my other question is how do we get clear? Because sometimes it's hard to even know why I'm upset with someone. I just know that didn't feel good. So please answer either one of those questions or something else that you just made up in your head.
all right. Well, what I teach people, first of all, is to value. So I have to give a little background here to give a good answer to what you said here. Teach people to value that, yeah, like that there's a lot of good information about what your deeper needs are, your unmet childhood needs. This is where we're going, David, is you can get to know yourself at a much deeper level if you learn to value, oh, that was a trigger reaction or a trauma response, which is basically a fight, flight, freeze that comes from unfinished childhood business, where one of your core needs, like the need for safety, loving attention, to feel valued and approved of, those are needs that every child needs to grow up healthy, and most parents don't meet all those needs perfectly. So we're going to have some misinterpretation about, oh, that need wasn't met. That means I'm invisible, I'm unimportant, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. Kids will, and this is usually, they don't think in these words. It takes a little therapy sometimes or reading this book to uncover the like secret language that you're making up about the world. Like, I'm not good enough is something about how I am and how the world is relating to me. So people overgeneralize some of those painful reactions when they're young because they weren't able to get co-regulation. This is holding by the parent. They weren't able to feel safe enough to go to the parent when they're upset and be held with their tender, painful feelings. What we mostly learned was, if I'm upset, it makes the adults uncomfortable. People don't have time for my pain. So we kind of, in a subtle way, get the impression, because we're taking our cues from the big people, if I'm in pain or upset, there's something bad or wrong about me. So then this whole emotional pain layer of a person, like the ability to reach out when you're upset or need of a hug or need of reassurance, that gets kind of pushed down for a lot of us. We're not real spontaneous about asking for those kind of needs to be held, witnessed, and just loved, because we didn't learn it from our early caregivers. If the parent had said, oh, honey, oh yeah, the kids were making fun of you, let me hold you, that really hurts. Yeah. Empathy, not, oh, you go to tell those kids, da, 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 or don't worry about those kids, they don't matter. That's what the average
Or a
parent.
line I heard from my mother
Mhm.
only once in the last 25 years, but she said, David, you're being too sensitive.
Oh, so many people got that message. So many. And
That I was like, oh, you did not just say that to me.
I,
But I got that when I was old enough to have some
that
perspective.
wasn't, yeah, that was only once in your history, but so many kids get that first subliminally and then verbally all their lives.
I'll give
And
you something to cry about.
that whole thing too,
Yeah.
that's the kind of people that are really gobbling up my book, because it shows you how there's absolutely nothing wrong with you when you get triggered. It's built into the human nervous system. It's a survival reaction, and we have to learn to cope with this reptilian part of our brains that tends to react automatically to anything that appears to be dangerous. But that part of the brain was evolved when there really were life-threatening predators around.
Right.
Okay. And so you had to be able to react instinctively. It was an evolutionary advantage in our primitive human times, but now there's not many tigers, waiting in the bushes. There's not many life-threatening situations. Mostly we're triggered by interpersonal dangers, like something that feels unfriendly, some kind of disruption between myself and the one I depend on, or some person I need, could be my boss even, but a disruption in connection, or a threat to my self-image, my self-esteem as being a good person, that sort of thing. So now it's all interpersonal dangers, and it would be a much more of an evolutionary advantage to be able to slow it down, slow the reactivity down, that quick fight, flight, freeze. But fight, flight, freeze is built into the nervous system. And if we're going to learn to have a better braking system, slow things down and go, oh, wait a minute, my partner has that personality style. They're always doubting somebody. That they start with doubt. They start with, where's your research? They don't start with trusting me. I know that about my partner. You could, if you were able to use your higher brain capacity as quickly as you use your reptile brain, you'd be able to think that thought. So we need to be able to slow things down enough to remember what we already know, and to learn how to question our immediate interpretations. And so that's just a little background to help people realize that, yeah, you might have some shame about the fact that you get triggered. You might have had people tell you you're too sensitive, but the information in this is golden for what needs healing inside,
Yeah.
like my fear that my voice doesn't matter. And there is the capacity to learn to slow things down. There are tools that you can learn, and of course they're in this book, From Triggered to Tranquil.
Great. Well, before we get to those, let me double click on some of the things that you mentioned. I love that you said, this story, we have a secret language. I love that. Secret language, let's put a name on it, what we're telling ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Then you mentioned this story that people don't have time for my pain. And I really relate to that, particularly at this poker example. I remember there have been some times when I have been upset by a decision that was made, or a rule I didn't know about.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no discussion. There was just, yeah, that's how it is. And so I figured I just had to suck it up. And so at this other group, I went and bulldozed over what someone had said. He objected to something that I was going to do. And I just bulldozed through it because I didn't think I was going to be listened to. Mm-hmm. And he said, and then later on I explained it, and he said, oh, I wish we'd had this discussion before you did it.
Yeah.
And I stopped, and I was like, firstly, I was like, was that an option?
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I wish we had this discussion before, so I could explain how I felt like I need to push through, and you see what you want. We come up with something that feels fair, not the kind of thing you do at a poker game normally, right? So I love this. People don't have time for my pain. And then this idea that nothing's wrong with you. I read this in the literature a few days ago, and I kind of glossed over it. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm just trying to fix this. And then what's happened over the last 2 or 3 days is something has changed in my nervous system. I hear the bang. I go a little bit on alert, a bit activated in my body. And then my cortex says, that's what your body does. That's the system. It thinks there's danger.
Beautiful.
It's that fast. And then I'm already coming down.
Yeah. And so you've got a little bit of a witness going now. And we can develop a witness to the early warning signs that we're triggered, such as making up that story that there's no time for me, or whatever story. You can witness your stories.
Yeah. So I just want to say it might even sound cliche to say there's nothing wrong with you, but I didn't realize how strongly I was judging myself and saying, David, you're weak, and this is not logical. It's ridiculous that you're in such a state of anxiety just because you hear voices out on the deck and you didn't know there were people around, and now you're like violently anxious, and I'm embarrassed. And this hearing you and reading the literature that says, no, this is just, you're wired to respond to certain things, and it may not be totally practical, but it's just how it's happening. And then the fourth thing that I got from everything you said is, and you started with this, is we can value the information.
Mm-hmm.
This is not just an unpleasant thing that's happening. This is going to tell you what you care about. This might tell you what the other person cares about. You might learn. When I did my interview with the current tenant, I was asking questions for half an hour. And then she said at the end of half an hour, well, I just want a place where I can feel safe.
Mm.
And it clicked. A light bulb went off, and I said, these questions I've asked you for the last 30 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
they're all geared so that I can feel safe in my own home.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So we have the same
I
goal.
knew you were going to say that.
So we have the same goal, and we oriented around that, and she just moved in a week ago. Who knew that we both wanted the same thing? It didn't have to be enemies, right? So there's the value, to your point of value. How much value did I get out of realizing what I really needed?
Yes. And that need for safety is like almost universal. So many people are going around feeling unsafe, and therefore very, very triggerable. And we want to, of course, create a safer world. So knowing how to soothe ourselves and help others feel safe in our presence, that's the name of the game now.
Oh, wow. This has just reminded me too. I worked with a therapist in Bali, and after every session, she'd say the same thing. I feel, I need.
Yeah. That's
Every session, no matter what I said, no matter what I brought, and finally it started to sink in for me, for my left brain, cerebral, whatever, control freak. I was missing those two pieces.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm feeling. This is what I need. So I don't want you to give away all the tools, because I want people to go and get the book so they can really dive into From Triggered to Tranquil. But can you give us a little teaser of what might be next, or something that we could use once we've realized and we read, okay, I want the value here. What can we do? What could I do in that situation of the banging doors to actually regulate?
Yes. When you notice one of the early warning signs that you're triggered, and in the book, I show you how to notice your early warning signs, then you pause, you slow things down so that you can get back into a safe place inside yourself. You know when you're starting to exhibit one of these early warning signs, if it's trying to fix it or wishing the other person would do something different that wouldn't push your buttons. See, a lot of people don't realize how much just habitual thoughts are part of the early warning sign, like a judgmental thought, or wishing the other person would. Now, why didn't they? Wishing they would do something.
Yeah. Or for me, it's like, what message could I send that's not going to get them upset, but is still going to be my truth? I can spend 2 hours on that.
Yeah. And see, all of that narrows your range of options. And so, you just admit that. So we have to be able to admit that we're wetting our pants, like,
Right.
I'm
wetting my pants.
out of options here.
I'm triggered. My animal brain is taking over from the cortex. Okay.
Yes. So you know that, and you develop a practice of taking 5 or 10 slow, conscious breaths. Through the nose is preferable, because this activates the vagus nerve that comes down from the brain. You can also kind of soothe the side of your face here where the vagus nerve is, but you can do various practices. And, I go through them in the book to help you bring safety to your nervous system, grounding. So there's different ways to bring yourself present. And then the next thing, you either, depending on how present you're able to get, you can just continue like, oh, I needed to pause. Usually if you're in an interpersonal situation, you might say, give me a minute. I need to collect myself before I respond, something like that. You can find a socially graceful way to do that.
Yeah.
Or you can, if it's a different context, you can say, I'm starting to get triggered. I need to calm my nervous system. I'll be back in a second.
Nice.
So sometimes those things can work in a short period of time if you're not too triggered. But a lot of times people have been going through their reactive cycle, either, yes, you did, no, I didn't, in an interpersonal, or grinding in their head how to fix it and that sort of thing. So it's going to take a little longer. And then you may, and it's highly recommended that at least when you're safe, maybe not in the interpersonal, but you take a bathroom break or you do it later when you're home, you go back and remember the thing that triggered you. And then there's a practice that I teach in the book called compassionate self-inquiry. So you start with what you heard or saw or what you wanted and didn't get. And then you feel body sensations, feelings, and through just following that, slowing down and practicing holding space for yourself by opening up your breathing, you will discover things about yourself just from that practice. I mean, there's few more elements to it. Like you said, I don't want to give it all away.
Yeah.
But there are ways to really learn to love yourself where it hurts.
Love it. So I'm gonna recap some of these for listeners and for myself. You want to catch the early warning signs, and Susan will show you what to look out for in the book. That'd be the first step. Mm-hmm. So oh, this is what's happening. And even as you catch that, I imagine that's bringing more energy into the cortex and away from the animal brain, just right, the witness. Yeah. And then you said slow it down, pause, stop, maybe find some language. It might be, hey, something's happening. I'm feeling something. I'm not quite sure what it is. Can you give me a minute?
Yeah.
Can we slow this down? Give me a minute to work it out. That's something we don't hear very often, right? So, you'll be pioneering in saying this. It could be in a group, or you might be like, look, I've seen people say, I'm a bit wound up right now. I'm just going to go and take a couple of minutes and come back, right? Could be as simple as that. People might be like, I wonder what's going on, but better than probably the alternatives. And then, so the slowdown sounds wonderful. And then you mentioned compassionate self-care, and it sounds almost like you're taking an inventory. When you can slow it down enough, you're like, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What are my body sensations? And that too is probably drawing more energy from the cortex versus the animal brain. And then you mentioned there are some other things like 5 to 10 breaths. There are some practical things you can do. I got to say, Susan, when I was massively triggered, when this happens, last thing I want to do is sit somewhere and do some exercise. Yeah. Like I walked outside and I did force myself to do box breathing, which I hear about a lot. I know how to do it. I did not want to do it, but within 2 to 5 minutes, I was pretty normal. So listeners, this is my plug. Even though it might seem like it's the last thing I want to do, these things. Oh, I just remembered a piece that started to have all this make sense for me. Mm-hmm. My therapist said, you've got to disengage from the content. Yeah. That was the one line I needed to hear at age 53, because I'm very cerebral and I think I can think my way out of it. He said, no, at a certain point, it's actually your brain's been hijacked. The cortex has been hijacked by the animal brain. You need to disengage from the content and do something physiological. Absolutely. Did not know that was a thing.
Oh, it's a total huge thing,
Didn't
especially
know it was a thing.
with couples. They'll be going, oh, yes, 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 I did. No, no, I never heard that. They're going back and forth. That's the content. I teach people, and this is all in the book too, to hearing you say that I feel. There's a phrase that I've written a whole book about the phrase hearing you say that I feel. That's the book, Saying What's Real.
Oh, nice.
That is a phrase that's designed to, even if you don't say it out loud, hearing this person say that I feel. It's like what
Yep.
your therapist is talking about, but it becomes automatic, kind of a useful instinct, a useful automatic thing of, okay, if I notice what I'm feeling, I'll notice that I'm agitated. I'll notice that I don't feel safe. And then I will do some self-soothing practices versus continuing to fight the good fight, because
Yeah.
that's a waste of energy.
Yeah. So this is a bit of a trick because the brain thinks that we need more content. That's what the brain thinks, right? The brain is like, no, I got to get my point of view across so I'm heard. I remember yelling at my girlfriend once, and she said, "If you keep yelling, I'm going to need to leave the room."
Mm-hmm.
I did not want to stop yelling. Everything in me was, no, keep yelling. But if I kept yelling, I knew I'd be yelling to an empty room. So I actually had to get a grip on myself. And this is also bringing up another girlfriend where I was angry and I wanted to go to the content. And she said, "Would you take 3 deep breaths with me?" And I said, "No, this is too important. I want to get it out now." And she said, "If what you have to say to me cannot survive 3 deep breaths, then I don't want to hear it."
Great.
Robin Lynn Smith. That's
What I really prefer, though, is somebody be able to say, "David, I'm scared. I'm scared when you talk to me like that."
oh,
I mean, if it's a couple, that's the kind of thing that I'm
yeah.
here.
Yeah, hearing that, I feel scared, and I don't want to feel scared with you.
Yes.
Yeah, nice.
You go to feelings. I mean, it's smart. These women were smart, but vulnerability has incredible power to shift the energy immediately into safety.
Right.
Um,
Wow. Well, I can't believe.
if you, like, somebody's telling you to, like, stop, stop or I'll leave the room. What if you did? Hearing you say that, I feel afraid I've just damaged our bond. Like, really teaching people how to find the vulnerable things that are down in there. And you don't find that until you've mucked around in your own unconscious mind for a while.
Okay.
And then you find that kind of language about what the fears are that are representative of unfinished business from childhood. These parts of yourself have never been heard or attended to. They've just been repressed. So once you get to know those parts, your capacity for saying I feel is just much richer. It's got much more texture to it. But it takes some some valuing, mucking around in your subconscious.
Love that.
It does not take that long, and it's not that hard. It just, you have to get over that initial resistance that you named, which was, gee, I just want to get my point across.
Right. Yeah, it maybe it doesn't take that long. Maybe it's not that hard, and the alternative can be a lot worse. Just being angry with people and having unresolved things and trying to one up each other, shutting down, withdrawing, that's very expensive.
Yes.
And so this sounds like, if you value this, if your spiritual intelligence goes up to the point where you're like, hey, maybe there's some real value in getting this, it sounds like you can change your whole life. Instead of running from all these things, it's like, all right, I'm going to lean into them. It reminds me of the book that came out recently by a friend of mine, and I think yours, Jason Diggs,
Right.
called Conflict Equals Energy. And I thought that was clever because he's saying in the conflict, there's value. And what I'm hearing from you is a similar thing. In the conflict, there is information,
Yes.
there is growth, and ultimately connection.
Mhm.
Yeah. I can't believe where the time has gone. We're coming into the landing now. Is there anything like, is there anything that you feel is burning that you didn't get to say before I ask you where can people go and buy the book and find out more about you?
I'm feeling complete with this, David.
Okay.
Great conversation.
Great. Oh, I've loved it. I've got so many scribbled notes down here, and you've given me some pieces and named some things that the trainer in me is like, oh, yes, we had to name that. That was good. So respect, Susan Campbell, appreciation. Thank you for writing the foreword to The Mouse in the Room. Very grateful for that. And I am just feeling so lit up now after seeing you break down something that can be very scary, very hard, and show us a path to how we can find more self-love and more connection with others. Thank you so much. How can people get the book and find out more about you?
Okay, well, I prefer people actually go to like Amazon so you can write me a review. Frankly, I don't make much money when you buy it from my website, but do go to my website and subscribe to my newsletter. My website's susancampbell.com, because I have a free monthly group Zoom call, free coaching. You know, you can get 10 minutes of free therapy from Susan Campbell once a month.
Awesome.
And it's a nice community of people who come on these calls. So that's all announced in my monthly newsletter. And you get the newsletter by going to susancampbell.com.
Right. And that Susan Campbell is with a P, Campbell.
Yes.
Susan Campbell, and Susan is SUSAN. Right. SusanCampbell.com. And then, yeah, listeners, if something resonated for you, go and spring for the $15 and get the book on Amazon. Yeah. And then nothing says thank you to an author like going and writing a review with one or two key points that you got out of the book. If you liked it. If you don't like it, maybe tell her how she can improve the next one. But yeah, go and leave a review. It's so cool to see those ratings go up and the review count. And that's sometimes how other people decide if they're going to buy the book or not. That there's a bunch of positive reviews. Susan Campbell, you rock. The legend, the woman, the myth. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, David.
You've been listening to Tough Conversations with David Wood. Now it's action time. Mastering your tough conversations will have a major impact on your team, your company, and you as a high-performing executive or entrepreneur. If you're ready, request a discovery session with me at playforreal.life so we can transform your team, your company, and you. And if you've enjoyed this episode, I would love you to help me spread this message of tough conversations in a very simple way. Just leave a public review at playforreal.life/podcast. And you may hear me read it out loud and thank you live on a future podcast. Now, let's play.